Still with you tonight on OG Nerd After Dark update. I am OG Nerd. Before I get into this story, I need to ask you something. If I told you that a woman received a 70-year federal prison sentence for asking her husband to move a box of magazines, would you believe me? What if I told you that wearing black clothing to a protest and using a messaging app were presented as evidence of terrorism? What if I told you that this is not a hypothetical, and this happened in Texas this week? On June 23, 2026, 8 people were sentenced to federal prison in Fort Worth, Texas, in what the Justice Department is calling the first ever federal terrorism case associated with Antifa. The sentences range from 30 years to 100 years in federal prison. They are known as the Prairieland Nine. Here's why this matters. Federal prosecutors accuse this group of being an, quote, Antifa terror cell after they attended a protest outside Prairieland ICE detention center in Alvarado, Texas on July 4, 2025, during which fireworks were set off. Property was vandalized and one police officer was shot and wounded, but not killed. Let me walk you through exactly who these people are and what they were sentenced to, because the details matter enormously here. Benjamin Song, the sole defendant convicted of attempted murder for shooting at police, received 100 years in federal prison. Marcella Ruedola, received 70 years, longer than most other defendants, because prosecutors said she committed obstruction by asking her husband to move boxes of magazines, anti-fascist magazines, after her arrest. Autumn Hill, Zachary Evans, Savannah Batten, Megan Morris, Elizabeth Soto all received 50-year sentences. Daniel Sanchez Estrada, who was not even accused of attempted murder or providing material support of terrorism, was convicted only of obstruction for moving a box of magazines and received 30 years. A 9th defendant, Inez Soto, will be sentenced on July 1st. Now here's where this story gets even more alarming. During the trial, prosecutors presented wearing all black clothing at the protest and using Signal messaging app as evidence of material support for terrorism. The prosecution literally argued, quote, providing your body as camouflage for others to do the enumerated acts is providing support. Operating a printing press, distributing left-wing magazines, material support for terrorism. Retweeting Antifa tweets, material support for terrorism. The trial itself is not without its own alarming moments. A defense attorney had a mistrial declared against her clients because she was wearing a t-shirt under her blazer featuring images of Martin Luther King Jr. and Shirley Chisholm, civil rights leaders, which the judge said risked biasing the jury. Defense attorneys argued that throughout most of this, defendants never intended violence. They were there for a noise demonstration in support of immigrants detained inside the facility. Sophia Collard, Deputy Director of the National Security Criminal Defense Center and attorney for Marcella Ruedola, said, quote, now anyone engaged in basic protest with the wrong political beliefs can be labeled a domestic terrorist when they have no intention of violence, not engaged in any violence, or not interested in any violence. This case did not happen in a vacuum. It followed President Trump's executive order in September 2025 designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, an order issued after the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. FBI Director Kash Patel personally posted about the Prairieland case on social media, making it clear the importance to the administration. The Justice Department hailed the sentences as, quote, the first sentencing of defendants affiliated with Antifa following President Trump's executive order designating the group as a domestic terrorist organization. Political reporter Matt Sledge of The Intercept, who covered the sentencing in person, warned, quote, we just have to watch for this playbook to be applied elsewhere. He noted a stark comparison that is drawing widespread attention tonight. The January 6th Capitol rioters who carried weapons, discussed killing members of Congress, and stormed the Capitol and injured 140 police officers were not charged with material support for terrorism. The government had the authority to charge them that way. It chose not to. For our Latino and Spanish-speaking community, this story hits directly. This protest happened outside an ICE detention center. The people inside that facility were immigrant detainees. The people outside were protesting their detention and how those protesters face sentences longer than most murderers ever serve. Now here's my take. I want to be precise because this story demands precision. One person fired a gun at police. That person, Benjamin Song, was convicted of attempted murder and received 100 years. I'm not going to pretend that shooting at a police officer is acceptable. It is not. But here's what I cannot get past. A woman received 70 years in federal prison for asking her husband to move a box of magazines. Another person received 30 years, not for shooting anyone, not for planning violence, not for anything that harmed a single human being, for moving those same magazines. And 5 more people received 50 years each for being present at a protest where someone else fired a gun. And prosecutors argued that wearing black clothing and using an encrypted messaging app, a tool used by millions of Americans every single day, constituted material support for terrorism. Meanwhile, the people that stormed the United States Capitol beat 140 police officers with flagpoles and fire extinguishers and discussed killing elected officials were not charged with material support for terrorism. Many received pardons. I'm going to say that again. January 6th, pardoned. Prairieland 9, 30 to 100 years. From my perspective, a society protects the right to dissent. It does not weaponize terrorism statutes against people who were protesting the treatment of immigrants. It does not sentence a woman to 70 years for moving a box of magazines. And it does not apply the law in one direction for people whose politics lie with the party in power and in a completely different direction for everyone else. The lawyer for one of these defendants put it plainly. The punishment must fit the crime, not the headlines, not the politics, not the fears that have been mongered about the case. Tonight in America, the punishment does not fit the crime, and every single one of us who believes in the right to protest should be paying very close attention. That's where I stand. Follow us for daily coverage. I'm OG Nerd. Stay informed, stay sharp, but most of all, stay woke. And remember their names. The Prairieland Nine. Their appeals are coming, and the story is far from over. I'll see you next time. Join the conversation at OG Nerd After Dark on TikTok at 12:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll see you there.